Now we've seen from cases the modern bioethical concerns about technologies and medicine. How about philosophers we learned in class? How would they approach these contemporary issues? Why don't we bring them into the same table and let them talk through these difficult philosophical concepts? So today we invited some of them: Aristotle, Kant, Foucault, Levinas, Heidegger, and Derrida. If they ever were to have a conversation, they are going to answer: how should we navigate the tension between respecting individual autonomy and addressing the vulnerabilities of others in making life and death decisions in modern medical condition? We shall begin with the philosophies of Immanuel Kant. To think about how we ought to act, we must begin with the foundation of moral law, the categorical imperative, which guides all ethical action. Autonomy is a fundamental expression of human dignity, and it is our duty to respect it in all circumstances. The decisions we make, particularly in matters of life and death, must be such that they can be willed as a universal law. In the context of medical decisions, such as euthanasia or gene editing, we must ask, could such actions be universalized without contradiction? The answer often reveals the ethical boundaries. We must never treat a person as a mere means to an end, even in medicine. Any intervention, whether it is to prolong life or enhance it, must respect the rational agency of each individual. Kant, while I agree that human dignity is central, I must caution against relying too heavily on abstract principle. Autonomy alone cannot capture the depth of ethical responsibility we feel toward others. When we are confronted with the sufferings of another person, when we see their face in pain, face in vulnerability, it is not a matter of applying a universal rule. It's an ethical demand, an encounter that causes us to respond. The patient in front of us is not an object of duty, but an other who commands our care. This question of life and death cannot be reduced to what can be universalized, for each life is unique, and each encounter with suffering is singular. Our responsibility is infinite, and it arises not from law. Levinas, your appeal to ethical responsibility is noble, but it overlooks the broadest systems of power that shapes these very encounters. When we speak of medical technologies, we cannot ignore the role of biopolitics. These technologies do not exist in a vacuum. These are tools of governance used to regulate bodies and control populations. Autonomy, as you and Kant describes it, is in itself a product of these power dynamics. It is not some pure natural right, but something shaped by the medical and legal systems that determine who is given the right to autonomy and who is not. Take gene editing as an example. It does not merely improve lives. It defines whose lives are seen as worth improving. These technologies extend far beyond individual autonomy. They shape populations, define norms, and establish who gets to participate in what is considered a healthy or worthy life. So the ethical frameworks we use to navigate these decisions are already entangled in structures of control and normalization. So while we discuss autonomy and the ethics of care, we must also ask who benefits from these decisions, who is given the power to decide. The ethical encounter, Levinas, is already determined by these biopolitical structures. We must critically examine how medical ethics is shaped by societal forces, who gets to live, who gets to die, and under what terms. Foucault, you highlight a crucial point, the system of power that underlie our ethical decisions. But I'd like to take it further and question the very categories we're using. Autonomy, for example, presupposes a self-contained individual making free choices. But is the patient on life support truly autonomous? Is the line between life and death really as clear as it appears? So these binaries are not fixed. They are shifting with the context and interpretation. And the medical technologies only complicate such ambiguity further. When we keep a patient alive through machines, are we extending life or are we simply deferring death? And where does responsibility begin and autonomy end when a person's life is sustained by such technology? We must deconstruct the assumption and recognize the instability of the very concept upon which we base our bioethical decisions. Derrida, while you question the categories of life and death, we must recognize something deeper about technology. It's not simply a tool we use, it shapes how we understand being itself. When we rely on medical technologies like life support or gene editing, we risk treating the patient not as a being in the world, but as a resource to be manipulated, a standing reserve, as I call it. Medical practice in its essence must not reduce the patient to data points on a machine or brain scans. We cannot allow technologies to dominate our encounters with patients, turning them into mere biological objects. The true danger is when the scientific method and technology block our ability to see patients as whole beings. So the doctor's task is to see beyond the technology, to engage with the patient's fully embodied experience of the world. Heidegger, your concerns about technology alienating patients are understandable, but technology, like all tools, is neither inherently good nor bad. What is essential is how we use it, and this requires phronesis, practical wisdom. Medical practice is not simply a science of applying rules or knowledge. It is about making wise decisions that balance the needs of patients, their community, and the greater good. Practical wisdom involves understanding specific situation of the patient, the nuances of their suffering, and the role that the medical technologies might play in alleviating or exacerbating that suffering. Phronesis involves a kind of moral discernment that goes beyond mere technological expertise or following universal rules. It requires us to use experience and judgment to make decisions that promote human flourishing. For example, gene editing might be ethical if it serves to alleviate suffering and promote the health and well-being of individuals, but we must still consider the broader context. Practical wisdom helps us navigate these difficult decisions and guiding us towards actions that align with the goal of medicine to restore health and enable a good life. With all being said, we can think about whose argument we find the most appealing.